Hey, folks, we're going to talk today about how you might want to do research to help you deliver a quality product that is going to get you higher scores on something like your extended essay or your internal assessment. Before we go any further, I'd like to recognize today's sponsor. Today's sponsor is Mountain Dew, green awesomeness in a bottle or a can, available in fine stores near you. Anyhow, now that we got that out of the way, my name is David Trail. I am a teacher, obviously, at Suncoast. And what most people probably don't know, unless you had me last year, was that I have written a book, and we're looking for a literary agent right now to get that published. But it wasn't something I did quickly or easily. It was something that took 14 summers. Having kids and teaching meant that only realistically could I get a lot of stuff done during summers. And that was when I wasn't taking kids all over the place or dealing with a lot of other things, whether it was summer vacations or other things. So I got the book done. And as a result, I learned quite a lot about researching. And I'm going to share some of those things with you today to allow you to benefit from what I experienced. So I'm going to show you an example real fast. Let's go to, there we go. If you were to look down on the bottom, if you were getting super crazy, you might notice that down here, let me take that out of the way. Down here, there's 425 pages, as in 425 sheets of paper. So if you're sitting there thinking about an extended essay that's, maybe 15 pages long or, something of that nature, yeah, I got you beat, man. And so, something that I would note in going through this, just randomly going through, just about every page, there's going to be something where it wasn't well known. And it's going to be super important in anything you do that is not a commonly known fact. We know Pearl Harbor was attacked on December 7th, 1941. But if you want to talk specifically about, what happened to one guy, or if you want to talk about individual casualties from one particular ship as an example, those are pretty specific details that are not commonly known. And as a result, you would need to cite that. So, for example, here I have an exact quote written by a soldier in World War II, Harold Samuelson. You see the inset here because it's longer than 2 lines. And here's the citation that goes to down here. I got it from, it's my son going out, interrupting the, recording I'm doing. Anyhow, so there you can see I took something from the Veterans History Project run by the Library of Congress. It's a great website that has firsthand personal accounts. Sometimes it has letters. Sometimes it has other things. We'll talk more about that coming up. But I cited where I got that source, and also the same thing for number 40 up here. So these are throughout the entire book. Okay, you can never have too many citations. I mean, let's point out that nobody's going to get mad at you if you document where you got your stuff from. They will, however, get really upset if you don't document enough. And as a result, it may look like you're trying to pass off somebody's words as your own, or that you are potentially, just flat out, trying to get by and cheat. And if caught, there's obvious penalties for that. So just going down through the 425 pages to give you a rough idea, there's a lot of things that come out in this. There's hundreds and hundreds. There you can see I'm up to 887 footnotes by page 350. And again, if you remember, there's 425 pages in the thing. So I had to go through, and every time I was typing something in there, as soon as I came to something new, I went and I did the footnote and made sure that I put it in the bib at the end. The bib at the end, for example, again, remembering 425 pages, right? So this starts on page 397, and you can see it's all alphabetized and it's all organized in there the way that it's supposed to be. And if you happen to look at the about right there, it's because that's what the title is. It's not capitalized. So you put it in just like that. But everything is alphabetized, just the way it is supposed to be. Most people are having issues with that lately. And it goes through 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 and it goes through. And again, these are things that I collected over, 14 some odd years to, here's all the interviews I looked at with the Veterans History Project. But all these individuals are in there, or all these sources are in there. So it's important you keep records of where it is you're getting your information from, because it could come back to bite you if you're not careful. So let's talk for a moment about your. Maybe I'm flipping around here, not doing such a good job. So let's talk for a moment about what's going to happen, with your topic. Your topic needs to be workable, first of all. You got to worry about, is your topic too big? If you're talking about the history of World War II, are you going to talk about, for example, the history of every single thing that ever took place or happened? And that's going to be difficult. There were things that happened all the world around the world. There were 16 million people who, combatants who were killed, and there was kinds of other people who were civilians who were killed. You can tell all their individual stories. Are you going to do your best to explain every single campaign and everything that's going on? You're going to obviously need to narrow down your subject. Another thing to think about is if your topic is too difficult. I mean, let's say, for example, you want to write about fighting that took place in China during World War II. Great topic. The problem might be that in order to find the sources you need, you're going to have to potentially really do some digging. And because you're talking about something that really happened a lot in a foreign country, some of the best sources might not even be in English. And if you don't speak Chinese or a regional dialect of Chinese that a source may be written in, you could have a real problem. If you don't have access to scholarly research facilities like a university library, again, that could be a problem. And it could take you quite a while to get the information you're looking for, which might fall outside the scope of your deadline. You need to make sure you've got a workable, narrow enough topic, especially for whatever parameters you've been given. So, for example, on the history journal assessment, if your topic is not, or your subject is not supposed to go more than 2,200 total words, and let's say, for instance, 1,400 of that is the evidence section, all you get is 1,400 words. You can't put down everything that ever happened in World War II at 1,400 words. Other than you say people fought, people died, it was expensive, it was terrible, the end. And that's not going to get you too far. So realistically, you've got to narrow your scope to something that is going to be researchable. And it's got to be something that's narrow enough to allow you to cover the ground that you intend to cover. And you may find that your initial idea, although great, is not something that can be researched easily and is not narrow enough. So you're going to have to maybe start again. So the earlier you start, you're looking for resources, the better off you're going to be at making sure your topic is something that you can do. So I ran into a problem at the National Archives. First time I went up there, I was looking for a topic, something my dad was involved in when he was in the Air Force, that at the time I was up there at the archives still hadn't been declassified yet. I knew about the outside of it, very narrow part of it, but there was a whole lot of stuff that went on in here that had not been released to the public yet. And as a result, I couldn't research it, found a roadblock right away. So obviously that would be something to avoid. Also, make sure you're not looking at something that's a really obscure conspiracy theory. If you're trying to prove some conspiracy theory that you've heard about, finding scholarly resources on it might be really difficult. Also, steer clear of things that in your research sites that could be potentially super biased. I had a student, actually, I had a few years ago. I was teaching something on the Nazi youth movements, and I found this really great website with lots of pictures and everything else. Just so happens it was the leading neo-Nazi website in the United States. And I didn't know that at the time. And I was like, wow, look at all this stuff. Excuse me. And all of a sudden I looked at who the source was and I was like, these guys might be a little biased in how they write about things and portray the Nazi movement inside Germany. So here's something I want you to do for a moment. I would like you guys as a group to brainstorm for a moment amongst each other and then share with your teacher, or if you're in my class, with me, some ways that, or some places you can go to find sources for a research paper or a research topic. I'm going to give you a goal of trying to come up with 8 different places, and there is no right 8. There's more than 8 actually. So I'm going to give you a few moments to brainstorm. We're going to pause right here, and you come up with 8 things, And if you come up with more than 8, great. But in the meantime, I'm going to stop here and let you come up with your 8 places to gather good research. Okay, so you guys came up with a number of things. We'll see how many you came up with, and I'll talk about some relative merits of each. So, starting close to home, Suncoast. We have an amazing media person in the form of Mrs. Armbruster. She is committed to getting you all kinds of help all over the place. And although it looks like we don't have a lot of books in our library, we have more than you realize. And the things that can happen through our library are certainly more than most people know about. What they can do, for example, is, of course, the books on the shelf. Great, fantastic. The foundation may or may not have subscribed to some databases that are useful. Fantastic. Um, Another thing that they've got that most people don't know about is any book or any material held by a Palm Beach County School District library can be brought into our library. They just send it over to our school, and then once you're done with it, you send it back. But anything in a Palm Beach County library, Palm Beach School District library, excuse me, can be gotten in here relatively quickly and relatively easily at no charge to you. You don't have to go anywhere except our media center to pick it up. There's another thing that's a little bit more challenging, and it's great, but you have to start early. And that's the ability to use interlibrary loan. Most people, again, are not very familiar with that because they wait till the last second. In this particular case, again, in the context of my book, I was trying to find a particular book, and we'll talk about how I did that in a moment. And I discovered that the nearest copy that I could possibly get from any library was in the Naval Air Station Pensacola Library up in Pensacola, Florida. And I went into our media center and I asked, is there a way to get this? And they said, sure, through interlibrary loan. And about a week later, I had that book that was really obscure. I think the author sold like 3 copies, one to this library. He gave one to his mom and he's got one on a shelf, and that's all it sold about it. But realistically speaking, suddenly I had this very, very hard to get book. I used it for everything I needed, and then I gave it back to the media center, and they mailed it back, and that was simple. Just as a note, though, I had a student several years ago. She now has her doctorate in veterinary medicine from Auburn, and she did a really great paper involving the Civil War. She found a pretty obscure book she needed. It was in a library in North Carolina. And she got the book from, the library in North Carolina to come down. She got what she needed out of it for the most part. And then she sent it back. And she gave me her rough draft as required. And as it turns out, she didn't cite where any of her information came from. No page numbers, no nothing. And I asked her, I'm like, hey, Amanda, where did this come from? And she's like, oh, my goodness. And she had to get the book back from North Carolina. But imagine for a moment her horror when she discovered that when it went back to North Carolina, somebody was already waiting on it, had checked it out, and it was no longer available. So they couldn't send it to her in a very quick time frame. So she kind of panicked a little bit, but she was able to get the book back down in time. She got the page numbers out of it, second time around, sent it back a second time, and was able to turn in her project with no penalties. But you got to be careful to get the information that you need when you're especially dealing with something that you might not have access to again. So that's super critical. So Suncoast, again, has our own stuff. It has stuff from the school district. It has interlibrary loan, and all those things are helpful. But the sooner you go in and the sooner you ask for help looking for things, the better off you're going to be. Going out just a little bit bigger now, you have the West Palm Beach Public Library down there in downtown West Palm Beach. Haven't been in there myself. I've been told it's a really good library. There may be other municipal city libraries out there that you can use. I'm not aware of them off the top of my head, but that's another avenue you can go to. So if you had the West Palm Beach Public Library, give yourself a pat on the back. Moving upwards just a little bit, the Palm Beach County Library System. Palm Beach County has a library system that has places all over the county. So, for example, if you live like where I did, where I had my first apartment after I got married, you would go to the Haverhill location. And let's say you went in there and you found a really, really good book was in the Green Acres location. Well, it's real easy. Haverhill gets a hold of Green Acres and they literally ship it over to them. It takes a couple of days and then it's yours for a couple of weeks. You don't have to go to Green Acres. You don't have to travel down to Boca if you don't want to, or Jupiter or wherever. You simply have to ask the nearest library branch to you and they'll get it in there. And some of you may have done that before. But again, that means you can't go in there the night before, say something is due, and say, well, let's look at all the books, and then discover that there's one in Deerfield Beach, and you're kind of not able to get there. So you've got to, again, plan your time out ahead of time effectively. Outside of that, we've got the school, we've got municipal libraries, we've got the county libraries. Now let's talk about some big time libraries. And that would be the universities that are out there. Palm Beach Atlantic, Palm Beach State, FAU. I think that's all of them I was thinking about. In this case, if you had those, give yourself more pats on the back because those places are also available. They might have different restrictions on what you can do for checking books out or even have access to the campus. I went down to PBSC several years ago. They had a book called Donald Duck Gets Drafted, all about how the Disney studios were involved in World War II. And I couldn't find it anywhere else except there. So I drove down from where I live in Martin County. And I got there and I'm parking and the security guard comes running by. He's like, what are you doing? You're not a student here. I said, I want to use the library. And he kind of freaked out for a couple minutes until I explained that really just needed the library for less than an hour. And then he said, all right, but you can't stay more than an hour. And I got to go in and I got what I needed and I got out. They just, didn't like having non-students park there because they want people with decals. Similarly, FAU has two locations, and you may know these. One's up in Jupiter, in Abacoa, and one's down in Boca. The one down in Boca is probably a little easier because it's a big time, university setting. Up in Abacoa, they have less parking, and people like to park there for random things. Thankfully, there's no spring training baseball going on right now, so you don't have to worry about that. But if you go up there, you can potentially go in, do some research. They have access to things that we don't hear. JSTOR is a really good database of journals. So if you're taking notes, write down JSTOR because that's something that, let's say a professor writes a paper and they put it in there and other people review that and say, is this person's evidence sound? Is this person knowing what they're talking about? Or is this person completely crazy? And if it gets published in there, it's good stuff. And that's really taken well in the academic community. So if you go up to FAU, it might help if you go see Mrs. Armbruster ahead of time and get a Cephalin card. If you don't have one of those, please do get one. It allows you potentially, if I remember correctly, to check out books, but certainly it allows you in the door. And same thing happens with PBSC and elsewhere. It's your I'm a high school student doing valid research, please don't hurt me kind of thing. And so again, university libraries, think PBSC, PBAU, FAU, either North or South Campus. It makes an awful lot of sense. Some people might have said in your listing of things, bookstores like Amazon or Barnes and Noble. Sure, you can go there, but I'm trying not to encourage you to spend money. So if you need to spend money to get your topic done, that's too bad. I'm sorry in advance. I didn't pick your topic. You did. And you can order books from them, but do bear in mind, there have been some slowdowns in delivery for one reason or another. And if you're trying to get things before a deadline to show me or your teacher 5 examples of your sources, you can't wait until the day before and expect them to have all the books you want. They may not have the books you want. So you're going to need to order those in advance if you're thinking smart. There are a couple other websites that you can go to. And I'm going to go ahead and let me see if I can. Where's my cursor? There it is. So that you can see how these are spelled. There's my sort of cheat sheet on what I was going to talk about today. All right. I'm typing this out so you can see it. Okay, so Libris.com is a place that sells used books. That would be a place to find the same book you're looking for, potentially more cheaply. There's another one, Abe Books. Same kind of thing. They sell used books. You can get them in I dragged it behind my car for a summer vacation trip, all the way to brand new. In some cases, autographed if you want. Another source most people would never consider for used books, eBay. also has people who sell copies. In some cases, there's a lot of people trying to sell the same book. And as a result of that, people are willing to sell it for upfront, not like a bidding option, but I'd be happy to get rid of mine for $1 just to get something for it. Um, so that's an option you can look at as well in terms of cheaper sites than Amazon or Barnes and Noble for full price. And both of them sell things that are used as well. So that's something to consider. But those three sites would save you money. And you're not going to get prime shipping, for instance, with a Libris or Abe or eBay. But given enough time ahead of time, you should be fine. Okay, sorry, it's going to take me a moment to flip back in because using lots of resources. Okay, so I don't know how you did on your list of places to get resources from, but so far we're doing pretty well. All right, at this point, I'm also going to stop, and I'm going to suggest that you turn to the person next to you and say, "Hey, what are some museums potentially I could go to get information for a research paper?" Think anywhere in the world. Think local. Think far away if you want. But take a couple moments and just come up with a couple of them each, and then share those with your teacher. And we'll pause here for a moment to give you some time to brainstorm on at least 2 museums you can think of that might have some helpful stuff. Okay. So there's lots of websites or lots of museums that are out there that have things that are going to be helpful. Here's an example. I'm going to go to the National World War II Museum in New Orleans. Well, actually, I'd love to go to the museum in New Orleans. But the National World War II Museum is a place you could physically go to if you wanted, and they have experts you could talk to if you wanted. But most of us just don't have our own private jets, so we can fly there anytime we want and do whatever we want to do. So they do have areas. You see students and teachers up here. A lot of these things are going to be helpful to people looking for things. And you can see, for instance, they have distance learning programs. It's usually done through YouTube or other ways like that. Educator resources. Well, you know what? Go ahead and click on that anyway if you want, because you are getting information that's going to be useful and demonstrating what you're talking about. Student resources over here as well. But I highlighted one thing in particular. The National World War II Museum has a channel on YouTube where they have veterans that are describing things they went through. They have experts talking about various things. Some of these were offered over the summer of 2020, to get teachers more prepared things. They have authors talking about their books. And there's a whole lot of things that you can do. If you're looking for a particular topic, you go up here to the search function in YouTube and look for it. And maybe it will come up, or maybe you didn't put in the right search terms. I did watch this one on the story of the Indianapolis, a ship that was sunk during World War II. And then a lot of the people who survived that spent basically a week in the water getting attacked by sharks. It's just always been a fascinating thing. It actually made part of the movie Jaws come to life. But realistically speaking, they've got stuff. And YouTube does have a lot of links to a lot of different programs, or a lot of different people who publish things that are very, very useful. But again, you're going to need to make sure you cite where you got certain things, and that's going to be important. So the National World War II is certainly a place. Somebody might have said, for example, the Imperial War Museum over in England, which kind of tries to, although it's British, it does do a lot of British, but it does also have other perspectives on things like World War II and World War I and other things like that. The Smithsonian Museum of American History, maybe the National Museum of Naval Aviation in Pensacola, or let's say, for instance, the National Park Service has stuff they offer for like the Rosie the Riveter site out in San Francisco. But there's a lot of places museum-wise that have things. National World War I Museum in Kansas City, for example. There are museums in Germany that are called documentation centers that deal with the Nazi regime and the horrible things they were doing. And realistically, they are pretty honest about what was going on there. So yeah, that'd be